All right, so my name is Evan Strong, and I make videos primarily centered around shoelaces, the lacing of our shoes, the tying of our shoes, and our clothing, and the discrepancies in those things that pull our bodies out of their natural functioning position. That we naturally have a natural center line and rotations and just ability to work, right, as a human being. So eventually I will be designing clothing so that we can have clothing, myself included, that we can just purchase and it can be centered and sit on our bodies correct without having to do modifications. Within any content that I have, you can find quite a bit of modifications that are very simple and easy to do that you can do to your own clothing, free videos that I've posted. So, I'm always talking about internal rotation, right, which is this, internal of the shoulders and of the hips. The big one's the hips. The big one is the hips, because if you can't internally rotate your hips, since they're at the center of your body, everything else will be affected. So, like, in order to sit in this position I'm in right now, it requires internal rotation of the hips. Internal rotation is an open position, right? Internal, if you follow the thumbs, versus external. When you go into internal rotation, it opens you up. Like my hips right now, they're opened up. If my hips were in external rotation, I couldn't activate my core and get here active, right? So if I were to do like a, I don't know, like some kind of spinny cartwheel type thing, right? Just kind of, oh gosh. I got thrown, man, so I just kind of laid there for a second. Anyway, I wasn't expecting that because I haven't done a cartwheel since I've allowed my body to have its natural internal rotation in the past few months. So the point with doing that was to show when you can get your toes, like my hands and arms were, pointed in, you can get very active. So when you look at martial artists, I love martial artists. I have loved martial artists for a very long time. When you look at them, you'll see their toes are slightly in. Like if they're in a fighter stance, I'm a little lower for the camera's sake, but if they're in like a natural fighting stance, they're on the outsides of the toes, outsides of the feet, with the toes pointed slightly in, right? That's something I've discussed many times and I've shown examples of. But even something like this, like bending down to get to anything, to tie your own shoe, to tie your children's shoe, to do something on the ground where you're going to be down here a little bit longer than wanting to be bent over. A lot of times you're on one knee if you're going to be doing that. Well, if you're internal, in an internally rotated position, then you can get there and you can just do whatever and you have strength, and from here you can just stand up, right? So the lacing of the shoes, my technique is within where my content is placed, but as far as tying them, take the outside lace over the top of the inside one on both sides, right toward the center. So in order to have, within any movement that you do, just activation through the entire body, the internal rotation is a must, okay? So, like, regardless of what I would be doing, like I've shown before what like a natural bend over to grab something looks like, right? Just bending over naturally with good internal rotation. I just did that cartwheel where I got a lot of whip into it because everything can tuck in like this. If I were to go to do a cartwheel and my feet were out with my arches collapsed, I have nowhere to go from here because there's binding within the hips and the spine and the rib cage, really everything, but that's where you feel it the most. But if I were internal, now I'm in a position where I can just really tucked toward my center. And if I were to just do a cartwheel from here, right, everything can kind of like hollow in or like open into an internal position. So, yes, internal rotation, what's crazy about it is in 2024, most people lack almost the entirety of their internal rotation. And it's not only half of your body's function, right? You have external rotation and you have internal rotation of the right arm, of the left arm, of the right leg and the left leg, stemming at the hip on the right side, the hip on the left side, the shoulder on the right side, and the shoulder on the left side. So half of that motion in most people in 2024, there's a lot of reasons, but the majority of the reasons are the clothing. And that's why I focus on clothing so much. Not only is it half of the function of the body, but it's where the strength is. It really is. You really have little to no strength in external rotation. External rotation uses a lot of the anterior parts of the body, which is the front, right? Like your quads or the front of your thighs right here, right? A lot of that activation is when you're in external rotation, and there's little to no strength there. In order to get internal, well, the point is, internal rotation is an activation of the posterior or the rear chain of your body, everything in the back of your body. So when you're doing any kind of daily task at all, if you're doing it coming from a place of chronic external rotation, chronic just meaning that's the position you're in and you have been in for many, many, many years, as are a lot of people, as was I until months ago, everything seems hard. Functions and movements and motions that your body does and is designed to do, handcrafted, pulled from the clay to do, right? Biblical, doctrinal. It talk about the gospel of Jesus Christ all the time, and I mean, the point being, internal rotation, not only does it imply coming toward yourself, having your own like central place, which is within you, but it's also the only place that you have any kind of strength, right? So doing any kind of movement, I don't know what to really necessarily demonstrate with, but anything that you do, because if you picture a diamond push-up, right, and you're like this, in this position, I haven't done push-ups in forever, I don't even know if I would be able to do one, but if you're in, I'm pretty sure I could, I just mean I haven't done them in forever. If you're in this position, it opens up your entire rib cage, and it loosens your shoulders, puts them in an open position. Like, look at the motion I have in my shoulders here. Now, if I were to go out like this, I can't because of mechanical blockages. The bones will hit each other. Here, now you're just open within the rib cage. So if I were to do a push-up, I'll just do like one. I just don't want to seem like I'm showing off out here in public or to you, because it's not about my strength. It's about opening into internal rotation allows those scapulas to get out of the way, okay? On your back, those two big bones, big flat bones on your upper back, they're called your scapulas. And they have a lot of range of motion in them, naturally. So when you go into internal rotation, you can kind of see it wraps your scapulas up and around your body a lot. And that allows your rib cage to have room to expand. So it's not only that internal rotation gives you a lot of natural strength that would just be there until your clothing places you into external rotation, but breathing. Breathing is the essential thing. That's the thing, is breath. And as you can see right now, how elevated my shoulders are, in a good, healthy, natural way, there's no tension, but they're just allowed to get up there. If my hands, oh, well, you see where my hands are. If I put my hands out like this, I can't get my shoulders up. I personally, having the mobility that I have, that I'm showing you, I cannot physically do it right now. I'm showing you. So what's required is to get toward the center to do anything. So, yeah, I've talked about internal rotation so much. I feel like it's good to kind of be on the ground like this to give a visual of what it really looks like, how much rotation there really is. Because if you look at any animals, right? Animals function normal because they don't have clothing placed on them that alters their body's natural positioning. And when you watch any kind of wild animal, or even a house cat or a dog, when they walk or run, their front arms, if you will, right, their legs, the front ones, are pointed inward like this, right? And that's how they move, because that's natural. That's how we move, if we're allowed to. That's what I'm doing right now. So there's a lot of internal motion toward the center that is very, very natural and healthy. So in order to I have to give credit to Postural Restoration Institute for this. I don't know the guy's name. I would definitely say it if I did, but I watched a video of his on YouTube. I have zero affiliation with them other than watching their YouTube videos months ago. He talked about how in order to feel alive, to have a sense of life, to have any kind of energy or awakeness at all as a human being, you must have internal rotation. And at that time when I watched that video, I had very, 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 very little, if any, really, internal rotation. And when most people, humans in 2024, are in a chronic state of external rotation through their entire body, people are not living their life. People are not even living with anywhere near a full life or close to what life really is. A lot of people are very out of touch with just what's real because their body is not even functioning with half of its function. And again, the most important half, the half that brings you to yourself, right? If you're constantly external, collapsed, everything in your body in external rotation is just collapsed. Your arches are collapsed in your feet that are naturally there and healthy, right? And everything. You will be breathing so much with your neck. There are diaphragms. Again, this information I got from Postural Restoration Institute, from their YouTube channel. This right here about the diaphragms in the neck, I didn't really know that. There's diaphragms within the neck as well as down here that expand your lungs. And a lot of people will feel discomfort in their neck when they exercise or breathe hard or in the cold a lot of the time. When it's cold outside and you breathe and it like hurts your throat, that's because you're breathing with your throat diaphragms too much. Because if you're in a state of external rotation, you know, the muscles in your neck and up here, a lot of them attach into your upper ribs here, first few ribs, and pull open essentially your rib cage. And if they're not allowed to do that because of having a tag in the back of your shirt, for example, then you will be breathing with your neck, and that's not good at all. So a lot of people are just so out of touch with life. It's as if they're living in like a distant place, but they're here. And the reason is because they're in external rotation and they can't get to, really, it's like getting to yourself, right? If you're external, it's like you're out there, you're falling into that. But if you're internal, you actually are so active. Like I've talked about, when I say the word active, it's nothing to do with the amount of sports that you play. It's activated muscles. Your muscles are in an activated position where they can just work at any instant. They're just ready to go, as they would naturally be. So if you're not in internal rotation, it's a very, 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 very easy fix. Now, let me explain this for a second, because if people at a physical therapist clinic, for example, or any kind of doctor, any kind of personal trainer, any kind of person that you go to that really does know quite a bit about the anatomy, at least, of the human body, right? The muscles, the bones, the ligaments, the joints, their placements, their functions, okay. But if they're trying to give you exercises to do to get back your natural internal rotation, it will not work if you're wearing clothing that does not fit you or that has any tags in it anywhere, and it will not work. And I know that from personal experience, because I've mentioned before, I went to physical therapy for quite a while, spent quite a bit of money, spent quite a bit of time for both my shoulders and my knees, and that did not help them. They're fixed. I don't know how you can really, measure fixed, but they're in good condition now. This was years ago, and at that time, the physical therapy is not what healed my injuries. Just tying my shoes evenly over to the inside, right, and lacing them with my technique, and wearing clothing that allows my shoulders to elevate, gets you into natural internal rotation. Because if your shoulder seams are too wide for your shoulders at all, and when I say at all, take that with a grain of salt, they can be slightly wider, but if you were wearing big shirts, like I was for so long, you will just be chronically in external rotation. Because you see how my shoulders are up, and that's what's allowing them to rotate in? If I try to put my shoulders down, I can't rotate them in. Because the way that, again, that scapula wraps up and out of the way. It has to elevate first. And really what it is it looks like it's elevating, right? A lot of people will think that they're elevating their shoulders so much when they're in a position like this. I was one of them. This is not elevated position. This is just a natural motion, because if you're constantly wearing too large of clothing, you will be down here. And so getting to natural feels like your shoulders are so high. And it's probably hard, because you're gonna have so much bound up muscle and scar tissue that you're almost not even allowed to get there. So when you start wearing clothing that fits, if you've been wearing oversized clothing for quite a while, it's not going to feel good. That's a disclaimer. That's personal experience, because your muscles are trained to work as best as they can in a very, very, very unnatural, imbalanced position down here, to where to get up here into a natural, active, working, rotating, functioning position with strength and a center, they have to now adjust from years of patterning to get to their normal. So when I started wearing shirts that fit just a few months ago, right, I used to wear between large and extra large shirts, but a lot of times extra large, and I now wear mediums. This shirt is a medium, and this fits even slightly tighter than some of the mediums that I even wear within this content that you've seen, right, if you've seen. But when I started wearing mediums just months ago, it felt so different. It felt so almost wrong, because not being allowed to even expand your rib cage for, as long as you've been wearing clothing that is too big, once you have a shirt on that actually fits your shoulders, it's a weird feeling. And I know that so many people nowadays in 2024 will relate to that feeling, because oversized clothing is an absolute fashion. so many humans are wearing clothes that are massive. I was one of them. And it wasn't even necessarily out of fashion. I just wore big clothing. I, was going through phases and stuff in junior high when it started, but I also just didn't really know what it meant for clothing to fit. I think a big thing to realize is if you're wearing clothing that actually fits you, and that's the only way you're going to get into internal rotation. I've talked about it before, that when people go to the gym and lift weights and build a lot of muscle mass, but wearing oversized shirts, a lot of men who are bodybuilders wear like hoodies to the gym. There's reasons for that. Some of it can be fashion. Also, I think it's really mostly fashion, at least nowadays. But you're training your body to try to do something down here when it wants to work up here. Like here, I'm just active, right? I could sit like this and just have the video like this and just sit and talk. But if my shoulders aren't allowed to elevate, I can't do that because it's forcing them to just be in a position where there's no internal rotation that can happen. So what I was saying, if there's any tags in your clothing, if it fits, it won't feel good. I went to the thrift store today and I bought some shirts and a pair of pants, a pair of shorts. And when I tried those shirts on, there's like this, you have to know the feeling of what it feels like once you've cut the tags out of your clothing in order to buy shirts that actually fit properly. You really do. Because if you go try to purchase shirts that are actually your size, but there's a tag back here, or there's a tag here, or both places, when you put those on, it's going to feel smaller than it is. It's going to feel too small when it might be the exact shirt that you need, because that tag will cause an unnatural gap in the back. And now your shoulders are sitting in a position where they're just uncomfortable anyway, having a tag there. But then since they can't like try to get out of the way by dropping into external rotation, if the seams on the shoulders actually fit you, right, then it's going to feel very uncomfortable. So you have to remove the tags from your clothing. I've mentioned many a time, it's synthetic material. You don't want that against your skin. Okay, your body doesn't want it, but yeah, it's your body, it's not a belief or anything, it's oil against your skin. You don't want that, but it also just causes unnatural gaps right between your shoulder blades, on only one side of you, right above your tailbone. So yeah, in order to have just natural functioning internal rotation, your clothes have to fit. They really do. So, I've mentioned I'm not into fashion. I'll wear button-up shirts quite often with tons of wrinkles. I don't care. It's not about the fashion, it's about the function of the body. And I know it's kind of contradictory to wear a button-up shirt and then have it have wrinkles right? But that's me. But it's so fashionable nowadays to wear oversized clothing. And if you do that, your life is hard. Speaking from experience, your life is hard wearing oversized clothing. It's so hard. So, like when I design clothing, if you're going to be somebody who purchases my clothing, buy sizes that fit you. Where the shoulder seams are at your shoulders. I mean, the big one is the shirts. Keep your pants up off of your hips, up over the top of them. But you breathe up here, and the pants do affect that. But if your shoulder seams are too big, it doesn't matter how good the design of the clothing is, right? I'm going to design clothing my clothing will be designed well. That's the only reason I'm making clothing, is for the material design, the fit, to allow your body to move. If you buy my clothing when I make it, and you buy it too large, it won't be doing for you what the whole point of me even designing any clothing at all will do for you. It has to fit. Our clothes have to fit. And this was like a concept for me growing up. It's like, what does that even mean, my clothing to fit? I always thought people thought I was just too, like, you know, like a scrappy kid. I used to use that word to describe myself. And I thought that's what people were saying when they wanted me to wear clothing that fit. I thought it was just so that I like looked better and I was more like presentable. Well, regardless of that, I'm not even gonna say here or there with that. If you want your body to function, right? If you just want it to function, and I'm just gonna kind of sit with that for a second. If you want function in your body, you must have clothing that fits. Otherwise, it won't work. Your body won't work, because it only operates in the way that it operates. I've said this so many times, but I can't tell my body how to work. He can't tell his, she can't tell hers, and nobody can tell anybody else's. We have a universal design within our very, very slight differences. And we are all made in the image of our God, Jesus Christ, and it only does what it does. And it doesn't reach down here. It just doesn't happen. And you're not going to keep your shoulders up here if your shoulder seams are too wide. You will never be able to, I would never be able to, battle that extra weight and width of a shirt just to allow normal function. So, in order to have anything working how it's designed within your being, you have to have clothes that fit, okay? I've thought very often about people in third world countries and how a lot of people in like first world countries, where I live is one, for example, United States of America. A lot of people here think about third world countries, and it's always about their hygiene, and it's about these certain little like products that a lot of them don't even want, because they understand what's real in those places. And a lot of people here, including myself at certain points in my life, don't understand what's even real. And so you give them these hygiene products like toothpaste, and they're like, ew, this is disgusting. This is like man-made gel out of like chemicals, and they don't even want that. What they need is clothing that fits them, so they can breathe, and so that they can move and reach and sleep well. Clothing without things in it that are causing their body to be in bad or worse positions than they already could be for any person on the earth. But I think that the point with those third world countries is people have a very skewed image living in first world United States of America, for example. Just that's where I live, that's what I have seen. They think that these people in these third world countries need things that they do not even want. They don't want those things. The things that we're thinking, as at least as a common society in this first world, the things that a lot of humans here think that people in third world countries need, they're missing the point. And I've mentioned so often talking with people, I don't think I've said it within like this content. I've talked about all the time how people in third world countries, generally, I understand the struggle is entirely different than what we have here in the United States of America, but they're generally much happier people, much more content, much more joyful, much more loving, much more giving, because they understand what's needed, and they have to work together to even survive. And here, it's a very different dynamic. And that's a whole topic I could discuss for a long time. The big thing is, a lot of people in places like that don't even have clothing. And in some cases, hear this correct before you think that I'm making some kind of accusation. In some cases, that is really, really good. Because then their body's just allowed to work. Because our problems here are so much different, right? A lot of times, it's a very common thing for people, at least in 2024 in the United States of America, to think that America is just like so much more well off, and we are like such like much like we have more opportunities and all of these things. In some cases that's true, sure, but we have so much modern garbage, fake man-made plasticky clothing, to where our bodies can't even function. So you might have a 70-inch TV, but can you even watch it without your body feeling like it's going to implode because it hurts to sit because of the position your clothing is placing you in? You know what I mean? That's a fighter jet. So yeah, it's like a full-on jet. Anyway, yeah, I guess to wrap this up is internal rotation. Maybe I don't necessarily need to wrap up the video, but to wrap up what I was saying there is, within like third world countries, right? Again, very minimal amount of clothing and very minimal clothing, the type that they actually wear a lot of the time. It actually allows their bodies to just work at least very, very, very much closer to just natural, right? As if there was zero restriction on it. So things like, again, I don't use the word posture, I've mentioned that so often, but what people call posture, it's gotten so much worse, right? People's just body positions, so much worse, so progressively quickly, especially within more first world type countries, because yes, we have an abundance of clothing and that seems great, but if it's plastic being placed on your body, it's going to affect your entire body, right? And since we do have such an abundance of clothing, it becomes this like identity. People attach themselves to their clothing and the logos and symbols and things on their clothing, and they become like a representation of something or somebody else through what they wear. And in doing that, again, a lot of it is the sizing, but a lot of it is also, you know, you have these things, big logos stamped on either one side or the other of your clothing, and that only allows movement. Well, not only does it only, because the material itself would already be restricting the movement quite a bit, but then if there's like a full-on stamped logo on the entire front, and I think I've gone over this a little bit, but you can't then get back here. And if there's a full-on stamped logo on the back, you can't get up here. So it seems good in a lot of cases to a lot of people, to me at certain times in my past, to have an abundance of clothing, to have all of these amenities that we have, but it is destroying our lives and our livelihood. So when it comes to being minimal, I wouldn't call myself a minimalist or whatever, but like, I'm very minimal with the things that I use, the things that I have, the things that I place any kind of importance on. The gospel is really, that encapsulates everything. The gospel of Jesus Christ. But that's the thing is, you know, within the gospel even too, it's, you know, it's get rid of, sell, give away all that you have, and go and take only what you actually need. And that's what I've done. That's where I've gotten to. And I wear very minimal clothing, and it just helps. Because even if my clothing fits, even if it's made of 100% cotton, if it also has logos on, unless those logos are actually embroidered and stitched with cotton, then it's not only cotton that you're wearing, because at that point you're going to have something like ironed on to the shirt, right? And if it is cotton, then that adds extra thickness, again, only in the area where that's at. So, yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah, man, this is just kind of more of a discussion video at this point. Ow, my knees are a little bit stiff after that. Because really it almost turned into just like a minimal discussion, because really allowing yourself to have minimal things and to attach yourself to ideally nothing within this world, but very minimal things, it will then allow your body to work better, right? It will. So that's why clothing is so essential, because clothing is just a covering for your body. They should allow it to just completely do its thing naturally still. I mean, even after sitting like I did for that long, I could just move and work naturally, because the position that my body's in doesn't get very much altered by wearing clothing. If I had nothing on right now, again, out of modesty, but like, right, the functionality that my body would have right now, I'd be able to sit just like this. And right now I have very, very little restriction. I mean, like I was saying earlier, I could just sit like this because my core is already activated. I'm going to sit like this for a good little while I talk, not to prove a point, but to prove this, right? That I could sit, it's just about balance more than anything, but I could sit like this for quite a while. I will. I'm going to sit like this for quite a while I talk. I'm not holding myself up, I'm just balancing. Because if my shoes were laced any differently at all, and if they were tied unevenly rather than over toward the inside, if my pants weren't up off of my hips, if my shirt seams weren't high enough to where my shoulders could elevate into internal rotation, and if they weren't behind my shoulders to where I could actually reach my arms, then this position wouldn't even be allowed to happen for me personally, with the amount of whatever you think that I have, whether it's strength or capability or flexibility or endurance or anything, whatever you think that I have that maybe somebody else doesn't. And I'm just speaking all this stuff out of like some kind of behind the scenes working out, and then I come do these videos. Okay, I'm gonna stop because that is quite burny at that point. I just don't want to go be stiff and sore for the rest of the day. I got other stuff to do. Let me be clear, I wouldn't be stiff. That's what I'm saying, because my body's just allowed through clothing to be in a position that it would just naturally work to where I won't get stiff after doing something like that. But I just mean, that's quite a lot of work within the core, and you're exerting, you're using energy to do something like that. So anyway, I think, I love that whole discussion about, again, like third world countries and the misconception of what they need. People get so worked up and in arguments and all this stuff about they have to help the third world countries by giving them like synthetic toothpaste, right? And like, that's just the one that came to my mind in this video, because they don't want that. They'll put it in their mouth, and if they aren't used to eating man-made food and living in like first world America, they're gonna be like, this is disgusting, regardless of if it's cleaning their teeth or not. That's not what they need. They need to just be able to be protected from the elements. I'm not trying to speak for people. I'm definitely not trying to do that, but I am at a place in my own personal experience, not just my understanding or not like I read a book on something, but I'm at a place in my own personal experience to where I've gotten so much more minimal than at least the people that I'm around, right? Compared to something like that, no, I got way more things and I'm still, whatever. But what I mean is, like, perspective-wise, seeing what my life looks like now after being as minimal as I am, and after getting down to the more simple basics, right? Mostly within clothing is what I'm talking about for the sake of this video. Allowing it to just fit well and getting rid of all the logos and everything, at least the ones that would be restricting its movement, it's given me like more of a perspective on less is more, right? It is, universally, for every human on the earth at any time ever. Again, it's doctrinal, it's biblical, seriously. So yeah, yeah. I mean, because how often do people do this? You know? I mean, just sit and just look around. Right? I mean, I'm serious. Less is more. It is. It is. Because the more things that you add onto your physical body, and that goes as well for internal things, supplements, medications, synthetic food, that really alters your body. But people a lot of times think that they need at least those first few things that I mentioned because their body isn't allowed to work because of the clothing. So less is more in every aspect of everything. Yeah, so anyway, minimal clothing is you know, and I don't know if we'll have our brand on the exterior of the clothing at all. I don't know. Maybe we won't. Maybe we will. Either way, it's not going to be like a big, bold, in your faces, like the whole front of the shirt kind of design. When I say design, when I talk about how I am going to design clothing, I mean the fabric, right? And I've mentioned that, but I want to be very clear, right? The cuts, the actual fit. So anyway, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, internal rotation has to be done. Well, it just has to be allowed to happen is what I mean. And if your body's in a neutral position, then you can go external or you can go internal, right? Ideally, well, I guess a good thing to say is that a neutral position implies actively internal, right? So yeah, anyway, it's just more of like a casual discussion kind of video. Yeah. Anyway, you know what I really appreciate is like pants from decades back that actually sat on the top of your hips and allowed your hips to open how they would naturally open. Anytime your pants drop below your hips, like off of the top of them down onto them, it's restricting their motion, right? Because they want to open. So anyway, yeah. Well, so it's just very relaxing when you're allowed to just function, because that's why people feel like they need to be places, and people feel like they need to do something, because their body is in discomfort because of their clothing. And so they feel like they need to do something. Really what you need to do is pull your pants up over your hips and have your shirt fit you and lace and tie your shoes correct and wear natural materials. That's really what you need to do. But people feel like there's something that has to happen because they're in a constant state of discomfort. And people feel uncomfortable when they know that there's something that was supposed to happen that they feel that they haven't done yet. But usually they can't figure out why, right? People just run from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, never actually fully doing those things. Maybe not realizing that's happening, but people don't actually fully do those things when they're running from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And they're not actually ever experiencing anything that they're a part of. Because if you're uncomfortable within your physical body because of your clothing, it kind of feels like there's something you need to accomplish, right? So anyway, September 3rd, 2024. Yeah, so clothing designs to come, as in like structural designs of the cut of the fabric, as I said. Yeah, this is very relaxing. I like this. I said a while back that I wanted this to be more of like a podcasty type of, you know, and here it is. So yeah, I did a bunch of flips in this field last year. Gainers, 1-footed backflips. It was fun. That was the first time I did them, is around that time ever in my life, and so it was really fun. Yeah, that's when I started learning all this stuff, because my shoes were laced close to correct. I almost had landed on this technique, but they were tied correct, at least for a lot of those times, and it was allowing me to do stuff that I always wanted to do. I mean, for years I did flips, but I didn't feel that I was even allowed to move, right? And I felt like I should have been able to move better and easier, more than I could naturally. And it allowed me to start being able to do that by tying them correct. And then I, laced them very closely to correctly, and then I landed on this technique. But the point is, when I was doing those flips and stuff last year, I was wearing huge shirts, extra larges, and that's when I started to pull my pants up actually above my hips, right? And that was allowing at least my lower body to open internal rotation and be allowed to do those kind of flips. So yeah, all of this stuff, it's funny because, like I was saying, again, third world country type of environments, right? They don't have these problems in a lot of ways because they're out there, and if they don't even have any clothing on them, they don't have any kind of restrictions physically, externally, besides their own body's capability, right? So when we get so accustomed to taking part in the world, right, and assigning ourselves to clothing and brands, we lose touch entirely with how our body just naturally works. So you'll see people, I'm not trying to call people out, but you'll see people doing so many warm-ups for something that does not require a warm-up. And then once they do those things, I'm talking about these people without calling them out, right? Because if they don't know, they don't know. I didn't know until I learned through experience and revelation and some people on the internet and stuff. But anyway, my hands kind of hurt, or my wrists after that. Anyway, yeah, we lose touch if we're not careful. So truth is truth, and that's all there is. Thanks for watching, if you did. My name's Evan Strong. Clothing to come, and yeah, thank you.